Here's a very common myth that you are either born with talent or born without it, and that is an insurmountable thing for some musicians.
I heard it said one time that talent just determines how hard you have to work to be good at something.
Totally agree with that one. I think some people have just a natural inclination to be better or worse at a thing, but that is not the defining thing. I knew a guy growing up who was just the most naturally talented, just professional feel at a very young age, but he never really needed to work or practice. And for me, I'm someone who like really had to put the time and effort into it, and eventually like my skills like far surpassed him because I learned how to get better. And a lot of what I can do is not because I was born with this musical talent. I think this myth exists because I think there's people out there who just want to believe that they can't do that thing, and that's their justification. It's great to believe that this person has a gift and I don't have that gift, and that makes me feel better about the fact that I never put that time and effort in to get as good as that guy.
Yeah, I think that's true. And then you also have the case though where you have the people that are incredibly talented and then work hard, and those are the people that just take off.
Yeah, there's certain musicians that no matter what I do, I will never be able to get to that level. I can put in the exact same hours that they put in, I will never get there. But I do believe that for everyone out there, they can have a fun and healthy relationship with creating music, no matter what stage you are at, if you want it bad enough and if you're willing to put some of the time and effort into not just practicing, but figuring out how to practice in a way that is most conducive to you and gets over whatever hurdles that you have that may be unique to you.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, the thing about practicing is you gotta learn the best ways to learn. And while there is no one-size-fits-all approach here, there are some overarching principles that you can bring in that will completely change your relationship to practicing for the better. And since I know so many musicians out there struggle with this, I've made a free mini course where I go over 12 things that I have found have really helped me have a healthy and productive relationship with practicing. Again, it's completely free. I'll put up a link to the Samurai Guitar Theory Guide to Practicing in the description. Anyways, let's get back to it. And that also ties into this myth that sometimes there are insurmountable hurdles within your music creation. And I think there is nothing short of being in a coma that will prevent you from being able to make music.
This is something I've struggled with for a long time. One of the first things I had to overcome was this idea that like, well, I can't make the music I want to make until I've got the studio because I want to be able to like track whole bands and I want to be able to record stuff. And it's like, no, that was an excuse. I need to learn how to use Pro Tools or Logic.
Or something even as simple as like, oh, my hands are too small to play guitar. Like, hold up your hand. Like, look at the difference in our hands here. Like, I have very small hands, and there are certainly things that I struggle with more playing guitar than I think someone with the average size hand, but like, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've found a way to like get over that. These aren't what's held me back.
Yeah.
And you can even take this further, like Django Reinhardt, one of the greatest gypsy jazz guitarists of all time. He really only had 2 working fingers. The rest were damaged in a fire. And his playing, you can clearly hear why he's doing some of those innovative things. Some of those runs make total sense when you realize he's only using 2 fingers. But he didn't just like lose his hand and say, oh, well, that's it for me.
Yeah.
He said, okay, well, I'm gonna figure out how I can make this work. And then he came up with this new thing that's incredible. And I think a lot of times in music, your limitation, it forces you to get creative. And that thing that you end up with is incredibly unique and different and cool.
Embracing your limitations or pushing through your limitations in your own way is part of where your sound comes from.
Here's a fun one. People often believe that at some point your fingers are gonna bleed when you play guitar.
Okay.
You're gonna play till your fingers bleed.
I have. Only a few times, but it wasn't my left hand. I've never had my fretting hand bleed. It's always been like my right hand from just hitting too hard on the string. Yeah, the idea that you're gonna play so much that your left or your fretting hand starts bleeding. If that's the case, I think you're doing it wrong.
The one place I have had it happen on this hand is like bending a string and I cut my nails too short. It like kind of separates between there.
Yeah.
And that was like a massive hurdle that I dealt with for a while because it would basically always happen once a month and it would suck playing guitar.
Yeah.
The workaround I have recently found is that I'll take crazy glue and put a little bit of crazy glue underneath there and like glue my nail back on, and then it doesn't hurt anymore. If it's bleeding on your other hand, it's you're hitting too hard. One time I was busking and I didn't have any proper gear to busk. I just went out and did it with an acoustic guitar. And to be heard, I had to hit this guitar as hard as I could possibly hit it, and then it made that part bleed. The idea of your fingers bleeding, I think typically people think it's gonna happen on the pads of your fingers. In my experience, that's just like never happened.
Yeah, doesn't happen.
So there's this myth out there. It's this whole idea that oh, I'm playing with feel. I don't need to do that. I don't need to work on that. I just play with feel. This one is a little bit of a trigger button issue for me because I would typically call myself one of those guys who falls into the category of a feel player versus a technical player. But I think what a lot of people do is they use that categorization to excuse themselves from putting the work in, or to write off that other guy who's put in some work on the technical side.
Rick Beato calls this the David Gilmour effect, where for ages people on internet guitar forums have argued that, like, you know, David Gilmour didn't play fast and he's one of the best players with the best feel ever, and you don't need to play fast and playing fast sucks. Like, I'm not a fast player, but I don't also then come back and say, well, it's because I play with feel, dude. Like, I play with feel, so, like, I don't have to shred. You either don't want to put in the work or haven't put in the work, and you're trying to cover that up in some way.
Yeah.
Some of the best players with the most feel in the world can also shred their asses off. Greg Koch is an example of this. Greg can play everything. Literally everything. He's probably the most versatile guitar player alive today that I know of, and he can play with the most pocket feel out there because he's put the work in. I think a lot of this stuff can come from where you feel maybe guilty for not being able to shred. And once I got over that fact in my own mind, I felt a lot more secure as a player in my sound, and I don't feel the need to, like, defend that in some comment section on a forum somewhere.
There's a myth that says that you need to practice X amount of time to become a great musician. I don't believe that. What do you think? Either.
So what is great? Well, Kurt Cobain couldn't really shred, and by many people's definition was barely a guitar player, but he was still great. So how much do you need to practice to become great? It depends on what you want to do and what you want to sound like, and what type of player you want to be.
Yeah, and I also think, like, I don't know how much Kurt Cobain practiced. I suspect it wasn't a ton, but I also think he logged the hours as an artist, drawing, seeing the world through this artistic lens that he had, and I think that's a big part as to why he was so great. It wasn't just like him as a great guitar player. It was him as a great artist, and he logged the hours, even if it wasn't necessarily practicing, experiencing the world in a specific way that lent itself to creating great art.
On the flip side of that, if you want to be Derek Trucks, you're going to have to put some work in, a lot of work in.
But I would also argue it's not necessarily the time, it's about the quality and how you practice, because I've known a lot of people who they sit there and they play for a long period of time, but they're not, like, actively making an effort to improve. Like, their practice skills aren't amazing. If you've really honed your practice techniques, you can get a lot done in a small amount of time.
The other thing that's important here is you have to find what works for you. In my 20 years of playing guitar, I have always hated practicing guitar. So I don't practice guitar. I don't sit down and have, like, a routine or a schedule, but for a lot of players, that's exactly what works for them, and they find joy in that, and they find a benefit in that. The way I've gotten better over the years is by learning songs that I want to learning how to record, learning how to make videos, and none of that is a, like, by rote practice schedule where I'm practicing technique and playing with a metronome and all this stuff, because for me, it just doesn't work.
In a way, what you do is practicing, because what practicing is to me is you take something that you can't do and you try to do it. You take something you don't know and you learn it, and then you just do that thing a bunch until you feel like you can do it. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Those are some commonly held guitar playing myths and mine and Rhett's opinions on them. And remember, if you want to improve your relationship with practicing and make sure you're doing it in the most efficient and productive way, check out my free mini course, Samurai Guitar Theory, Guide to Practicing. The link for that is in the description. As well, a great way to support the channel is picking up some of that Sammy G merch. The new design is the Samurai Guitarist old school video game that I always wish existed. You can find a shirt like this over at shopsamuraiguitarist.com. As always, thank you all for watching. Until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, look after the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.